Have you ever questioned who you are? What if I told you that the you think you are, doesn't exist? Is your sense of self nothing more than an illusion created by your mind? This isn't science fiction. It's neuroscience, psychology, philosophy. And today, we will break the illusion of self and uncover a truth your mind won't let you see. The illusion of self. Right now, you probably feel like a single, unified self, me, sitting inside your body, controlling your thoughts and actions. But here's the catch, there is no single, central, you, inside your brain. Neuroscientists have discovered that the brain is made up of different modules, each handling separate tasks, thinking, feeling, remembering, making decisions. These processes create an illusion of continuity, like a movie made up of still frames. You feel like a single person, but in reality, you are a collection of ever-changing thoughts and experiences. Think about this, every day, you change. Your body replaces millions of cells. Your thoughts evolve. Your emotions shift. The person you were 5 years ago, do they still exist? If your memories, beliefs, and habits were different, would you still be you? Psychologists argue that our sense of self is a narrative, a story our mind tells itself to make sense of our experiences. Just like a book is made up of many chapters, your identity is a constantly unfolding story. And what happens when this story changes? Imagine someone with amnesia, when they lose their memories, do they lose themselves? What about people with multiple personality disorder? How can one body have different selves? These questions reveal that our identity is not fixed but fluid. The brain is not a single entity, it's a collection of competing thoughts, emotions, and decisions. The part of you that craves junk food is different from the part that wants to be healthy. The part that wants to stay in bed is different from the part that wants to be successful. These different aspects of you are constantly battling for control, yet we believe we are a single, unified self. Let's take it further. Studies show that when we make a decision, our brain has already made the choice before we consciously realize it. This means the you that thinks it is in control is actually just an observer. The philosopher David Hume described the self as nothing more than a bundle of perceptions. Imagine looking for a permanent self in your mind, it's like trying to find a single wave in the ocean. There is no fixed entity, only movement and change. So, if there is no single, permanent self, then who, or what, are we? The answer might surprise you. Stay with us as we dive deeper. The science behind it. The illusion of self is deeply rooted in the workings of our brain. Neuroscience has made astonishing discoveries that reveal how our brain constructs a sense of identity, and these findings challenge the very core of what we believe about ourselves. One of the most striking pieces of evidence comes from studies on split-brain patients, individuals whose corpus callosum, the bridge between the two hemispheres of the brain, has been severed. These studies reveal something fascinating. When the two hemispheres are disconnected, each half of the brain begins to function independently, almost as if two separate consciousnesses exist within one body. For example, in experiments where one hemisphere is shown an image and asked to describe it, the other hemisphere, which cannot see the image, often makes up a completely different response. This suggests that our unified sense of self is not as solid as we think, it is merely a byproduct of the brain's ability to communicate with itself. If our brain can generate multiple selves in a single body, then what does that say about the idea of a stable, singular self? Another compelling finding comes from brain imaging studies on decision-making. Researchers have found that when a person is asked to make a choice, such as pressing a button with their left or right hand, brain activity indicating the decision occurs several seconds before the person consciously decides. This means that the conscious mind is not actually in control. Instead, the brain acts first, and then the conscious self merely rationalizes the decision afterward. This illusion of control is known as post-dictive reasoning, where the mind fills in the gaps to create a coherent story. Moreover, neuroscientists have identified default mode network, DMN, a set of interconnected brain regions responsible for self-referential thoughts, including memories, introspection, and planning for the future. The DMN is highly active when we are not focused on external tasks, which suggests that our sense of self is largely constructed through internal storytelling. This aligns with psychological theories that our identity is simply a narrative, a collection of thoughts and experiences shaped by memory and perception. Further evidence comes from patients with brain damage or neurological disorders. There are cases where individuals lose the ability to recognize themselves in the mirror due to conditions like prosopagnosia, face blindness. Others, suffering from Cotard's delusion, genuinely believe they do not exist. If our self were an inherent, unchanging truth, such conditions wouldn't be possible. These cases reveal that our self-image is nothing more than a cognitive construct, one that can be altered, or even erased, due to changes in the brain. The philosophy of no self. The idea that the self is an illusion isn't new. It has been explored for centuries across different philosophical and spiritual traditions. In Buddhism, the concept of anatta teaches that there is no permanent self. The Buddha argued that clinging to the idea of a fixed identity leads to suffering because our experiences, thoughts, and emotions are constantly in flux. Enlightenment, in this sense, comes from letting go of the illusion of self and seeing reality as a dynamic process. Ancient Greek philosophers also debated the nature of self. Heraclitus famously said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice," emphasizing that change is the fundamental nature of existence. If we are always changing, then how can we have a fixed self? On the other hand, Descartes took a different stance with his famous declaration, "I think, therefore I am." He argued that our ability to think proves our existence. But modern neuroscience challenges this notion, suggesting that our thoughts are merely the byproducts of neural processes rather than evidence of a singular self. In more recent times, existentialist thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre argued that the self is not something we discover but something we create through our choices and actions. In other words, we are always in a state of becoming rather than being. Even in the realm of psychology, thinkers like Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud suggested that our personality is not a singular entity but a combination of different subconscious forces competing for dominance. Jung's concept of the persona and shadow highlights how different aspects of ourselves emerge in different situations. The philosophy of no self ultimately suggests that freedom comes from recognizing this illusion. By letting go of attachment to a rigid identity, we can live more authentically, embrace change, and find peace in uncertainty. What this means for you. So what does this mean? If there's no real you, then who is feeling emotions? Who is making choices? Understanding the illusion of self doesn't mean you disappear, it means you stop being controlled by a false identity. It means you become more present, less attached, and truly free. By recognizing the illusion of self, you can let go of anxiety about the past and future, as you realize there is no permanent you to protect. Embrace change and adaptability, knowing that your identity is fluid. Detach from ego-driven suffering, as you stop seeing yourself as a fixed entity in need of validation. Live in the present instead of being caught in the mental loops of self-narrative. Make decisions more freely, since you recognize that thoughts arise from brain processes, not a singular self directing them. When you dissolve the illusion of self, you find peace in uncertainty. You stop trying to define yourself and instead experience life as it truly is, moment by moment. This shift in perspective is not just philosophical, it's deeply liberating. So, ask yourself, if the self is an illusion, what's left? The answer? Pure awareness. And that might be the most real thing of all. If this video made you question your own sense of self, don't stop here, keep exploring. Dive into neuroscience, psychology, and philosophy. Observe your own thoughts and see if you can spot the illusion in action. If you found this insight valuable, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more deep explorations of the mind, and share this with someone who might find it just as fascinating. And now, I leave you with one final question: if you are not the self you thought you were, who, or what, are you? Let's continue the conversation in the comments below.